Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So I'd like to offer my greetings and welcome everyone this evening. So for a lot of people, when they come new to Dhamma, come new to practicing Buddhism, one of the things that can be a real driver, something which a reason for us to start getting interested in practice, getting interested in Dhamma, is because we have suffering in our lives. We have some kind of problem in our lives or something we feel we can improve or we can get rid of. So it might be, we're just dealing with a lot of stress and anxiety in life. We may feel that work or relationships are becoming overwhelming. We might feel that we've got a lot of anger and we're having difficulties dealing with that. Um, but whatever it is, usually it's some kind of this. We have some kind of suffering. We have some kind of dukkha in our lives, and we come to the Dhamma to help fix that, to either help reduce it or get rid of that dukkha altogether. And of course, this is a great reason to practice Dhamma. The whole reason to practice Dhamma is to put an end to suffering. As the Buddha said, he was asked, what he teaches, and he said, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. So it's really for us to understand this situation of dukkha and to put an end to it. But but sometimes, with some of these things, we're always working on problem solving. Once the problem comes up, then we work on getting rid of it. Again, this is very good. But one of the other things we can do with Dhamma, and where it's encouraged to do with Dhamma, is to get rid of the problems before they come up, to help work on preventing these difficulties from coming up, these mind states from coming up, preventing these all this dukkha from coming up. So when we talk about when the Buddha talked about in the Four Noble Truths, right effort, not only was right effort getting rid of these unwholesome mind states, it was preventing the arising of these unwholesome mind states and then actively bringing up wholesome mind states. And then the ones which are already there, try to strengthen and keep going. Kind of reminds me of there was this little story that Ajahn Nando told us last time he came to visit Wat Pah Nanachat, which was almost 20 years ago. He so Ajahn Nando is one of the very senior disciples of Luang Por Chah, of the Western ones. He's originally from New Zealand, but for many, many years, I think several decades, he's had a monastery in North England. But before he ordained with Luang Por Chah, he had actually ordained at Dhammayut. He had ordained at Wat Bawan, so the main Dhammayut monastery in Bangkok, or one of the main ones at the time. And he had ordained there, and then he went off to go stay um, with Luang Por Tate. And Luang Por Tate was this very, very famous disciple of Luang Por Mun. So he was this really great, forest monk. He's pretty much universally accepted that he was enlightened, and he had very good practice. Apparently ran a really great monastery, and he was supposed to be almost like Deva-like, or you'd say almost like angelic in his mannerisms. Very polite, very kind, a lot of metta, very, very good things about him. And Ajahn Nando said one of the reasons he chose to go there was, he was so impressed with Luang Por Tate, and he was so impressed with the monks he had met from Luang Por Tate's monastery. So Ajahn Nando went from Bangkok up to this little monastery up in Luang Por Tate's monastery up in northeast Thailand. And he was saying that one of the things Lumpur Tate encouraged the monks to do was he encouraged the monks to get to know him, to, come see him, come chat with him, and create this relationship, create this rapport, get to know each other. And he said, that he was encouraging them to do this before they had problems, so that when problems arise, there's always already this relationship there, and you already know them, and you feel comfortable and able to go talk about any problems that come up. And so, it's kind of, the same with our different practices we do, to prevent uh, these difficulties, these different problems of coming up. We want to get familiar with these practices. We want to get to know them. We want to get experience with them before we need them, before these problems come up. So, it could be the same as like, um, you have someone like a paramedic or a firefighter, they train again and again before any type of problem has come up. Before the fire happens, the firefighters train how to, use the hoses, how to put them out, how to drive the truck, how to do all of those things beforehand. So when an actual problem does come up, it becomes very secondhand. They can just they don't have sorry, like second nature. They don't have to think about what to do. It just becomes natural, becomes memory. They're so familiar with how to do things. And so, this is something we want to, develop for ourselves in our practice. We want to get familiar with doing these practices before we need them. So, they always say, like, when you get angry, that's not the time to start learning how to do metta, learning how to do loving kindness. You want to develop that skill beforehand. So when the anger comes up, you can develop this loving kindness. You know how to deal with it already. And so and one of the positive benefits of that is, if you're developing these skills for dealing with different problems beforehand, these different types of meditation, which can prevent these problems from coming up, and deal with these problems when they've come up, is that these are going to help you actually prevent these mind states from coming up. Or if they do come up, they're not going to come up as often or as powerfully. So, for example, taking up a practice of loving kindness, learning how to do loving kindness, metta meditation, and bringing those qualities of loving kindness and practicing them in our daily lives as well. It's going to be really working at reducing our anger, reducing that stress and that tightness we feel. So the long-term benefit of it is it'll come up less. Our anger will be diminished, and when it does come up, it won't come up as strong. And then when it does come up, we're so familiar with how to practice loving kindness and how to practice all these other skills we've learned for dealing with anger, that it's not going to be as much of a problem, and we can overcome it a lot easier. It's kind of similar to like plane mechanics. So, when you've got those big, jets like the 747s, the big passenger planes, um, the mechanics are always working on them when, of course, when they're not flying, but they always give them tune-ups and work on them so that the problems don't come up with the engines. They keep the engines, they want to keep them as tip-top shape as they can, and everything going really well, so that problems don't come up. Because, of course, if a problem comes up in the air, it's a very big problem. So they want to prevent these beforehand, catch them beforehand. And if a problem does come up, they've done so much work on it. It's hopefully just a little problem that won't create too much problems for the people on that plane. And it's the same with us. We want to develop these things so that so that these problems don't come up so often. And when they do, we can deal with them quite well. So with these types of meditation, we can do, and these practices we can do for overcoming those. I see, and even myself, I talk a lot about loving kindness, about dealing with anger. And this is something, in the West, we talk a lot about this. But one of the practices that is very prevalent in the suttas, and especially in the practices of monks, is the practice of body contemplation. And so, just when developing body contemplation, the only one thing to be aware of is that for some people, it can bring up some stress. It can bring up some tension. So if you do find when you're doing body contemplation that a couple days later, you find you're really depressed or you're really angry, then, maybe work more on developing samadhi and loving kindness and those practices first before doing um, body contemplation. Because again, when we're doing these practices, we're doing them to reduce and try to get rid of these unwholesome mind states. So if the practice is leading to more unwholesome mind states, it's not really what you want to be doing. So, but for most people, practicing body contemplation is really good. It's a big part of, the monastic life. So when we ordain as monks, in the ordination ceremony, are the upajjhaya, the preceptor, the person who's ordaining us, actually has to give us these some body contemplation meditation objects. So it's these five parts of the body he gives us. So hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin. And then he gives them to us in reverse order as well. So and so so these are like the external parts of the body that we see. So this is this meditation object we're given on the body. So of course, for monks and monastics, it's very helpful because contemplating the body, doing these different body contemplations, asubha contemplations, can really reduce, your lust, your greed, reduce your attachments to the body. So of course, living as, celibate monastics, that's very helpful. And so it's a big part of trying to help us stay as monks. But also, so doing these practices, can really reduce those. But they can also it really reduces our attachments to the body. And so it's seeing the body as self, because, the body, it's just made up of elements, but we really attach to this and we see our body as me and mine. And we think of other people. A lot of times, we think of them in terms of their body, that's them, that's this person, that. But really there is no enduring self in the body. It's just something we take up for a period of time, and it's something that, we create a lot of attachments to. And there's a lot of strong attachments to this. And, it can create a lot of suffering in our lives. So a lot of times when we think about someone who's attached to the body, has a lot of attachments for their body, craving for their own bodies, um, we usually think about this as, say, someone who's very vain. So say someone who's, very beautiful and they're very obsessed with their beauty. They're obsessed with their good looks, and they're very attached to that, or they think they're very beautiful and very attached to that. But the attachment to the body, can be on the other side too. It can be someone who has body issues. A lot of times they can be just as attached, if not more attached to the body. Because, again, aversion is the flip side of attachment. It's another form of attachment. So, we can look at it like, say, if someone had a particular issue with something in their body, like say they don't like their nose or something. And, they may think about this all the time. They may be attached to it. It may be creating so much suffering for them, this parts of the body, particular part. It could be their weight. It could just be the aging process in itself. Someone really having difficulties dealing with the fact that we get older, that our bodies, get wrinkles, start to sag, our hair loses its color. We get those aches and pains. In Thai, they have the saying when you get older, nanga luka When you sit down, you go When you get up, you go And this is just a natural process. But the we can get really attached, and this can create a lot of suffering for us. So as we start, developing this body contemplation and really working on actively trying to see the body as not me, not mine, not myself, this is just elements, this is just parts. So there's different ways of, developing this body contemplation. And one of the ways is contemplating the different parts of the body. So in our chanting books, one of the chants we use is this chant of the 32 parts of the body. And so, it says, this body is just a bag of skin filled with unattractive things. And so you just contemplate, and it goes by just part by part. So like hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, and it goes through the body part by part. So we can contemplate like this and taking it apart because we always see the body as a whole, like this whole body is me, this is mine. But when we take it apart into its different parts and see it's just a whole series of different parts, we say, well, is that me? Is that mine? Which part here is me? Which part is mine? It's the same as if you take a car, you look at a car and a really like fancy car you like, and you look at it and you go, okay, that's a car, that's a Ferrari. But then you take it apart and you lay all the parts out in a field. Would you still be attached to it in the same way? Would you still see it as a Ferrari? And so we contemplate with ourselves, our body, like, where is me in this body? These are just parts of the body, and they're just made up by of elements, and so we contemplate this, and it challenges our perceptions of ourselves, of our bodies, and in this way, it can really reduce that attachment to the body. And I had one friend, he was a Canadian monk, and he was staying with this one Kruba Ajahn, and he was asking him about this. And he was saying, I've heard people say before, if you really contemplate the body, it's really easy just to like let go of the body and you just don't care and everything like this. And this Krupa Ajahn was saying, well, actually, if you're really contemplating the body a lot, it's very easy to let go of your views. So a lot of those views we attach to, it's easier to let go of because again, so much of our sense of me and mine and self is um, in and around our bodies. So, so even in the Wat Pah Pong monasteries, so all the different branch monasteries of Ajahn Chah, he had actually wanted them all to have a skeleton in the main meditation hall. And at Wat Pah Pong, they had one. I think they had two at one point, actually, and in like a glass display case. And at Wat Chat, we have one as well in a glass display case in the monastery. And so that the monks can use this and use this as a meditation tool, look at it and being able to see this is what I look like on the inside. And you can see that when you look at it, it's no longer that person. Sometimes, and the Wat Chat one, there's actually in the case, there's a plaque of the lady who his body was donated. And many years ago, decades ago, her daughter used to come to the monastery quite often, and she'd, clean the case and take care of it and stuff. But when you see it's no longer that person, it's just, elements. And so again, as this is one of those practices that we do a lot to in the monasteries to really reduce lust, the greed, the attachment to the body, attachment to the sense of self. And one of the reasons we also do a lot of it with the body, it's when we have a lot of attachments to the body, but also the body's very easy to see. So sometimes the mind can be very quick. When you're contemplating mind states, they're very quick, they're moving very fast. Whereas the body, it's here, it's solid. When you're sitting meditation, it's not going anywhere. It's changing very slowly. And so it can be much easier to contemplate. And it's always in the present moment. It's not going anywhere. It's not in the past. It's not in the future. It's here now in the present moment. So so it's really good for us, when we're practicing, to work on dealing with these different types of problems that come up in life, different types of problems which come up in the mind, but also for us to really be proactive and work on trying to prevent other things from coming up, try to keep the mind peaceful and bright so that these problems don't come up as often. But inevitably, up until the point we're enlightened, there's always going to be something. Something's going to come up. These different mind states are going to come up. We're going to have bad interactions with people because, however much we try to manipulate and create the best external circumstances, something happens, right? That's just the way the world is. It's unpredictable. Lumpur Cha said everything is uncertain. So even if we're living alone by ourselves in the forest, um, unpredictable things happen all the time. You know, this year in Winnipeg, the spring has been incredibly strange. A very late spring. We had a dust storm a few days ago, so there's all these like unpredictable stuff. There was actually a little bit of snow this morning, but so it can be quite unpredictable. So even if you want to live alone in the forest, stuff's always happening. When we practice, in these ways, we can really reduce that suffering in our lives. And contemplating the body is a really great source for wisdom. It can help lead us towards enlightenment, which of course is the end of all suffering. So I'd like to offer this to everyone as a bit of a reflection for this evening.